Ah, my dear one, come closer, sit by this old chair of mine, and let the sound of the rain soothe your mind. Tonight, let me tell you of a hidden place, a tale whispered only when the rain falls soft and steady, like tonight. Far beyond the village, where the hills rise like sleeping giants and the forests stretched dark and deep, there stood a lighthouse, though it was nowhere near the sea. They called it the Lantern Keeper's Tower, and it rose alone on the highest hill, its stone walls weathered by wind and storm, its great lantern glowing softly through the mists that so often blanketed the land. No one quite knew who built it, nor why, for no ships ever sailed those hills, and no rivers ran near. Yet for as long as the oldest villagers could remember, the light shone faithfully each night, a beacon of comfort and mystery alike. The man who tended the lantern was known simply as the keeper. Tall and quiet, with a long gray beard and eyes like the sky after a storm, he was as much a part of the tower as the stones and the flame itself. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice was kind, like the hush of the wind through tall grass. Each evening, as twilight deepened and the rain or fog crept in, the keeper would climb the winding stair to the lantern room, where he would tend a great flame, trimming the wick, polishing the glass, and setting the light to burn steady through the night. And though no traveler ever seemed to follow its glow, still he kept it shining, as if waiting for someone or something only it could see. The villagers often wondered about him, spinning quiet stories over their hearths as the rain tapped gently at their windows, tales of lost sailors, of wandering spirits, of promises made beneath moonlit skies. But none dared ask the keeper his truth, for they felt somehow that the mystery was his alone to keep, until the night came when he chose to share it. The rain fell in a soft, steady curtain over the hills, turning the world silver and still, as though time itself had paused to listen. On such a night, a young traveler named Finn made his way along the narrow paths that twisted between the trees and climbed the hill toward the Lantern Keeper's tower. Finn was not like the villagers who only wondered from afar. He was driven by a question that tugged at his heart with every step. For as long as he could remember, he had dreamed of the tower's light, a warm and steady glow that called to him on sleepless nights, even when he was a child safe in his bed. And now, grown and with courage enough to follow that call, he had set out to find the truth of it, guided only by the lantern's glow that pierced through the mist like a promise. His boots sank softly into the mossy ground, and the rain pattered against the hood of his cloak, the only sound besides the gentle sigh of wind through the trees. The higher he climbed, the clearer the light became, its golden beam steady and sure, never flickering despite the storm's breath. Finn wondered as he walked, why did the keeper tend a flame so far from any road or shore? Who was it meant for? Each tale he'd heard of ghosts or lost souls or forgotten kings seemed both possible and impossible all at once beneath the rain's quiet song. And with each step, the light seemed less a mystery to fear and more a comfort, a guiding star on a night when the world felt very large and he very small. At last, Finn crested the final rise, and there before him stood the tower, tall and proud, its stones dark with rain, its windows aglow with the lantern's gentle flame. The door stood closed, but light spilled from beneath it, casting a soft halo upon the wet stones at his feet. Finn hesitated, his heart pounding not with dread, but with wonder, and then drawing a steady breath, he raised his hand and 3 times, firm and clear, as the rain fell like music around him. Inside, he heard the slow, sure steps of the keeper descending the stairs, and the door creaked open upon a face both kind and weathered, with eyes that seemed to hold the storm and the sky and all the secrets of the night. The door opened with a groan that echoed into the mist, and Finn found himself standing before the keeper, taller than he had imagined, with a cloak the color of midnight and hands lined with time. But what struck Finn most were his eyes, pale blue and deep, like water that had seen stars long gone. The keeper didn't speak at first. Instead, he studied the young traveler for a long, quiet moment, as if seeing something behind Finn's eyes that even Finn didn't yet understand. Then, slowly, the old man stepped aside and held out a hand, inviting him in without a word. Finn entered the tower, leaving the rain behind, and the warmth of the lantern's glow wrapped around him like a blanket, drying the mist from his hair and calming the beat of his heart. Inside, the tower was unlike any place Finn had ever been. The stone walls were lined with ancient shelves, filled not with books or tools, but with bottles, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each one holding a flicker of light, like tiny suns resting in glass. Some glowed brightly, others dimmed to embers, but all were alive in a way Finn couldn't quite explain. A spiral staircase wound up through the center of the room, leading to the lantern chamber far above, and everywhere there were charts and maps drawn with symbols he didn't recognize, stars and patterns that shimmered faintly even in the low light. The keeper gestured for him to sit near the hearth, where a small fire crackled, and then finally spoke, his voice low and steady like rain on old wood. "You've heard the stories, I'm sure," the keeper said, pouring tea into mismatched cups. "Ghosts, sailors, lights that lead the lost. Most are wrong, but not all." Finn leaned forward, his fingers warming around the cup, his eyes never leaving the keeper's. "So what's the truth?" he asked softly. The old man looked toward the stairs, toward the glowing lantern above, and replied, "This tower, it doesn't light the way for ships. It lights the way for memories, for promises that have drifted too far, for people who've lost the path, not their way through the woods, but their way through themselves." He paused, studying Finn again. "And you've been dreaming of it for a long time, haven't you?" Finn nodded slowly, the truth of it blooming in his chest like a candle. He didn't know why he'd come, not truly, only that something inside him had called out, and the lantern had answered. The keeper's words lingered in the warm air, wrapping around Finn's thoughts like the soft, endless fall of the rain outside. Finn stared into his tea, watching the steam curl and vanish, feeling the weight of what he had heard. A lantern that lights the way not for lost travelers, but for lost memories, promises forgotten, hearts adrift. It was stranger and more wondrous than any tale he'd been told by firesides or whispered on stormy nights. The keeper rose slowly, his long fingers brushing dust from a chart pinned to the wall, and with a nod he motioned toward the winding stair. "Come then," the old man said quietly, his voice carrying the gravity of countless years. "If the lantern's light called you here, it is time you saw the flame for yourself." Together they climbed, step by slow step, the spiral stair creaking beneath their boots. The tower seemed to hum around them, a deep, patient sound like the voice of the earth itself. The higher they went, the warmer the air grew, touched by the breath of the great lantern waiting above. Finn's heart beat loud in his chest, not from fear, but from wonder. The sense that he was crossing the threshold into something far larger than he had ever known. At last, they reached the lantern room, and the keeper swung open the heavy iron door. Finn stepped inside and felt the warmth of the flame wash over him, gentle and steady, like the embrace of an old friend. The lantern itself was immense, its glass polished so fine it seemed invisible, the flame within bright but soft, its light reaching out through the night like a beacon of memory. But it was no ordinary fire. As Finn gazed into its heart, he saw shapes dancing there, images woven of light and shadow, faces he did not know, but somehow recognized, hands clasping in farewell, a child's smile, a tear upon a cheek, the glint of a ring pressed into another's palm, promises, hopes, farewells, and beginnings. The lantern's flame did not simply burn, it remembered. It kept alive what time tried to steal away. The keeper stood beside him, watching the flame, his face lined with both sorrow and peace. Every night, he murmured, I feed it with what must not be forgotten. And tonight, it seems, you've brought something of your own. Finn's eyes widened as, within the flame, he thought he glimpsed a figure, small, cloaked, walking a path through the mist, a reflection of himself or a memory he hadn't yet found. He did not know, only that the lantern had waited for him as much as he had waited for it. The lantern room was filled with a quiet that felt sacred, as if even the rain outside dared not disturb the moment. Finn stood unmoving, his breath shallow, his eyes fixed upon the wondrous flame. It pulsed softly, like the heartbeat of the tower itself, casting gentle light that seemed to reach into the deepest corners of his soul. The shapes within the fire shifted and swirled, not wild, but purposeful, as though each flicker carried a story, each spark a promise. Finn watched the images change, a mother's hand releasing a child's as they parted at a village gate, a soldier's gaze turned back one last time before vanishing into the mist. Two friends clasping wrists, swearing loyalty beneath a stormy sky, and in that light, Finn felt the weight of their hopes, their fears, their vows, all the things that the world tries to forget, but that the lantern guarded like treasure. The keeper stood beside him, his voice low and steady as the flame. This lantern does more than shine through the night, he said. It holds what the world leaves behind. It keeps safe the moments people think are lost, the promises broken by time, the love that lingers long after farewell. My task is to feed the flame with these memories, so they burn bright and steady for those who still seek them, whether they know it or not. He turned to Finn, his eyes filled with a strange kindness and a sorrow that seemed as old as the hills. And now, the lantern has called you. You must decide. Will you offer it what weighs on your heart? Will you trust it to keep safe what you fear might be forgotten? Finn's throat tightened. He hadn't known until that moment how much he carried. The small griefs, the unspoken hopes, the silent goodbyes. He thought of his father's laugh, fading from memory, of a friend lost to distance and time, of promises he had made to himself on lonely nights beneath the stars. And he knew, without needing to speak, that the lantern had seen it all, and was waiting patiently to help him remember. Slowly, with hands that trembled not with fear but with the weight of the moment, Finn drew from his pocket a simple token, a smooth stone, worn by years of turning it over in his palm during restless nights. A stone his mother had given him as a boy, saying, "For luck and for finding your way home." He held it out to the keeper, who nodded, and together they placed it at the base of the great lantern. The flame flickered once, bright, warm, sure, as if in thanks, and the memory of that gift became part of the light. The moment Finn placed the small stone at the base of the lantern, he felt a strange lightness, as though some invisible weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying had been lifted from his heart. The great flame glowed softly in response, and for a fleeting instant, Finn thought he saw his mother's gentle smile reflected within its golden heart. The warmth that washed over him wasn't just from the fire, but from the sense that his memory, his promise, was now safely cradled within the lantern's keeping, where time could no longer steal it away. The keeper watched him quietly, his weathered hands resting on the stone ledge that circled the lantern, his eyes reflecting the same flame that had guarded so many countless moments. He seemed as much a part of the tower as the stones and the light itself, and now Finn could see the toll that duty had taken. A quiet sorrow woven into his kind gaze, a heaviness born with steady grace. "You see now," the keeper said, his voice low, like the soft murmur of rain against the glass, "that this lantern is not for guiding travelers across dark lands or seas. It's for guiding hearts that have strayed from what they once held dear. Each flame, each glimmer is a promise kept safe, waiting for its keeper to return, or for someone like you to come and carry it forward." He turned then, moving toward a great chest at the edge of the room. With a creak of old hinges, he lifted its lid, and inside were dozens of small tokens, rings, ribbons, scraps of parchment, lockets, and tiny carved figures, pieces of lives, farewells. "These," he said, his voice soft with wonder and weariness, "were left by those who came before you, who trusted the lantern to remember when they could not. And when I recall, it is for someone else to tend this life, to honor what must not be forgotten." Finn's breath caught as he realized the keeper's secret burden. He was not simply watching over the lantern, but over the dreams and memories of countless souls, night after night, storm after storm, with no one to share the weight. And now the lantern had called to Finn, as it had called to the keeper long ago. The boy understood deep down that his journey had only just begun. The light he had followed through the rain was not only to ease his own heart, but perhaps to take up the keeper's task when the time came, and help the flame shine on for others who would one day seek its warmth. As the storm whispered beyond the tower walls, and the great lantern pulsed softly above them, Finn sat cross-legged beside the ancient chest of memories, its treasures gleaming faintly in the amber glow. The keeper, now seated on a wide wooden bench, worn smooth with age, leaned back against the curved stone wall, his eyes distant, gazing not at the flame, but through it, as if looking back into a time long buried beneath years of silence. Finn didn't speak. He only listened, sensing that what was about to be shared was something sacred. And after a long, thoughtful pause, the keeper finally began, his voice softer than the hush of the rain, like a memory being dusted off and spoken aloud for the first time in many years. "There was a boy," the keeper said, "many lifetimes ago, who lived in a village that no longer stands. He was quiet, curious, not so different from you. He loved the stars and the rain, and he believed, even as a child, that there were stories the world had forgotten, just waiting to be found. The lantern's light flickered gently, casting slow-moving shadows across the curved stone walls, and Finn listened with wide, steady eyes. One night, a great storm came, wind like wolves howling, lightning tearing through the sky. And in that storm, the boy lost his brother, a promise unkept, a farewell unsaid. That pain never left him, not really. So when he came of age, he climbed the tallest hill he could find, where the clouds seemed close enough to speak to, and he built this tower stone by stone with hands that trembled but never stopped. The keeper turned his eyes to the lantern, and then he lit the first flame, not to guide ships, but to keep the memory of his brother alive, a promise that though time might steal voices and faces, it could not take away love. Others came in time, drawn by dreams, by grief, by something they couldn't name, and he welcomed them. He kept their stories, their tokens, their hopes, and the flame grew stronger, wiser, fuller. He looked back to Finn, his gaze clear and calm. That boy was me. I have been keeper for longer than I can count. And now the flame calls for someone new to learn its language. Finn's chest swelled with a strange mixture of sorrow and awe. The keeper's tale was not just one of loss, it was one of deep, abiding purpose, of love turned into light. And in that moment, he understood why the lantern had always glowed in his dreams. It had been waiting for him, as it once waited for the boy who became the keeper. It was not just a flame, it was a legacy. The rain continued to fall in a steady rhythm, gentle as a lullaby, echoing through the stones of the tower as if nature itself was listening in hushed reverence. After the keeper's story settled between them like a comforting quilt, Finn was quiet for a long time, not out of sadness, no, but because something within him was beginning to stir. A purpose he had never known he needed was now blooming in his chest. The lantern hadn't simply called him by chance, it had remembered him before he ever stepped foot on the path. It had whispered his name into dreams, lit the way through the storm, and now gently nudged him toward a door just beyond the curve of the lantern room, a small wooden arch, half hidden in ivy and shadow. The keeper noticed where Finn's gaze had wandered and gave a faint nod, as though he had been waiting for the boy to find it on his own. "You may enter," he said quietly, "but step with care. What lies beyond is not for eyes alone. It's for the heart to truly understand." Finn rose, his fingers brushing the smooth stone ledge of the lantern as if to draw strength from its glow, and crossed to the arched door. He pushed it open gently. The hinges groaned, and a warm breath of air, thick with the scent of old paper, polished wood, and something else, starlight perhaps, greeted him. Beyond the threshold was a circular chamber lower than the lantern room, with walls that curved like a cradle. Shelves lined every inch of it, stacked not with books, but with strange objects, feathers bound in ribbon, locks of hair in glass cases, music boxes without keys, seashells etched with initials, and dreams. So many dreams. He felt them brush past him like mist, soft and yearning, humming in the quiet. In the center of the room stood a single pedestal, upon which sat an ancient tome, leather-bound, its corners worn with time, its cover marked with a symbol that shimmered faintly in the lantern's glow, a circle within a flame, surrounded by tiny, careful stars. Finn stepped forward and opened the book, and what he saw made him draw a long breath. The pages weren't written with ink. They glowed faintly with light, and each one told a story, not in words, but in images, in emotions, in moments. A father holding his daughter's hand beneath a tree of golden leaves, a promise whispered in a crowded train station, a wish made on a stone and dropped into a stream. These weren't just memories, they were dreams, the very heartbeats of those who had come to the lantern in search of meaning, connection, or peace. And Finn, standing in the center of that quiet chamber, realized that these stories weren't only kept. They were nurtured, healed, and returned to the world through the flame, reshaped, renewed, like starlight reborn each night. The Keeper hadn't just preserved memory. He had been feeding hope back into the sky. The hush of the chamber wrapped around Finn like a second skin, soft and solemn, holding him steady in the warm breath of magic and memory. The book of dreams remained open before him, its glowing pages turning slowly, not by wind, but by will, as though the stories themselves were eager to be seen. He reached out, fingertips hovering just above a page that showed a child releasing a paper lantern into the night sky, the glow of it carrying some silent wish upward into the stars. And he understood, not with his mind, but with something older, deeper, that this place was more than a keeper of the past. It was a bridge between longing and light, between what once was and what might still be. The lantern didn't just burn for remembrance, it burned to give stories new endings. Behind him, the Keeper stepped softly into the room, his cloak whispering against the stone floor. "The light does not trap the past," he said gently. "It lets it breathe, lets it live again. But it must be tended always or it begins to fade. That is the burden and the blessing." Finn turned toward him, his heart fuller than it had ever been. He knew now that the flame was not only a refuge, it was a responsibility. He could walk away, return to the village, to his old life and quiet dreams. But he also knew he would never again feel whole outside these walls. The tower had been waiting, not just to show him its secret. It had been waiting for someone to carry it forward. The Keeper seemed to read the answer in Finn's eyes before the boy could speak. "I knew the moment you knocked," he said with a smile that held both sorrow and joy, "that my time as Keeper was nearing its end. The lantern knew you before you knew yourself. That's how it works. It only calls those whose hearts are already part of its light." He moved to the pedestal, gently closing the book. "If you choose to stay, the lantern will show you how to care for it. The flame will teach you, as it once taught me. But the choice must always be yours." Finn stepped beside him and looked into the old man's face, worn with years, yes, but peaceful. The peace of someone who had held the light, protected it, and now could let it go. And in that silence, Finn understood something that no book or story could ever teach. Some destinies are not found on maps, but in the quiet call of a lantern glowing in the night. The rain outside fell steady and soft, a soothing rhythm that seemed to match the beating of Finn's heart as he stood at the threshold of his choice. The air in the tower felt different now, thicker with meaning, as if the walls themselves were listening, waiting for his answer. Finn gazed once more at the great lantern, its flame flickering gently, casting light that was both ancient and new. He thought of the long road that had brought him here, of the restless nights when that glow filled his dreams, of the quiet yearning he'd carried all his life without understanding why. He thought of the book of dreams, the tokens resting in the chest, the faces he had seen in the fire's heart. And in that moment, he knew there was no choice at all. His heart had made the decision long before his mind could name it. "I will stay," Finn said softly, his voice steady and sure, though filled with wonder at the weight of his words. "If the lantern will have me, if I can learn to tend its light." The keeper's face broke into a smile, one of deep relief and quiet pride. He placed a hand on Finn's shoulder, his touch light but warm. "The lantern chose well," the old man said, "and so have you. There is no greater honor than to care for the hopes of others, to guard what must not be forgotten, to keep the flame burning for those who need its light." Together they turned toward the lantern, standing side by side in the soft glow. The past and the future joined in that quiet, sacred space. For the rest of the night, beneath the hush of the rain and the steady song of the wind, the keeper showed Finn the ancient ways of the tower, how to feed the flame, how to listen for the stories it carried, how to protect the tokens and dreams left in its care. And as dawn crept slowly over the hills, painting the mist in silver and gold, the keeper took one last look at the lantern he had watched over for so many years. Then, with a peaceful heart, he stepped down the tower stairs and into the morning, leaving behind the light and its new keeper. Time moved differently in the tower once Finn became the keeper. The days passed like clouds, gentle and slow, and the nights were filled with the soft crackle of the lantern's flame, the quiet hum of memory, and the never-ending symphony of rain tapping at the windows. Finn settled into his new life not with hesitation but with quiet purpose. Each night, as the sky turned indigo and mist crept over the hills, he climbed the winding stair to the lantern room, just as the old keeper once had. He carried in his hands new tokens left by wanderers and villagers, a folded letter, a broken pendant, a child's drawing, and with each one he listened to the story it held. The lantern welcomed these offerings with a gentle flare of light, drawing the memory into its glow, giving it a home among the many that came before, and in return it sent soft warmth across the land, guiding not travelers of the road, but travelers of the heart. Over time, Finn came to understand that the true magic of the lantern wasn't in the flame itself, but in the silence that surrounded it, the sacred stillness where lost dreams could rest and be remembered. People began to speak of him, this new keeper, with reverence and gratitude. They never saw his face, for he rarely left the tower, but his presence was felt in the way the nights seemed less lonely, in the comfort found within a forgotten dream, suddenly remembered, in the way hope returned to those who had quietly let it go. And Finn, though alone in the tower, never felt lonely, for he was surrounded always by the quiet voices of the past, the steady beat of the present, and the whisper of futures yet to be written. On some nights, the flame would shimmer a little brighter, and Finn would dream of the old keeper walking through the mists, his face serene, the rain falling around him like a blessing. And Finn would smile, knowing he was part of something timeless, a light not meant to shine for himself, but for everyone who wandered through the world searching for meaning, for memory, for home. The lantern would always burn, as long as one heart dared to remember and another dared to hope. As seasons shifted and years quietly passed. Finn's bond with the lantern deepened in ways words could scarcely describe. Each night, the tower became a temple of stillness where time's rush softened and the heart's deepest wishes rose to the surface, drawn gently into the glow. Finn came to know the language of the flame, how it pulsed brighter when a memory long buried found its way home, how it flickered softly when a promise fulfilled finally came to rest. The flame's light had a rhythm, a heartbeat that seemed to match the world's quiet hopes, and Finn became not only its keeper, but its student, its companion. He learned that no offering, no matter how small or seemingly simple, a worn button from a coat once loved, a flower pressed between pages, a single bead from a broken bracelet, was ever insignificant. Each one carried with it a weight of meaning, a breath of a story, a trace of someone's soul. On stormy nights, when lightning danced on the horizon and the hills were cloaked in mist, Finn would stand at the lantern's side and feel as if the whole world was holding its breath, and in those moments the flame seemed to burn with a strength beyond itself, as if it drew power from every dream, every farewell, every hope entrusted to it across the years. And Finn, standing there with the rain streaming down the tower's glass, felt both humbled and at peace, for he understood now that the lantern wasn't merely a guardian of the past. It was a bridge, a light to guide those who felt lost, not in the forest or the storm, but in their own hearts. And night after night, he vowed anew to keep that flame alive, steady as the stars, until the day it called for another keeper. The lantern's glow reached farther than Finn ever dreamed, its quiet warmth spilling out beyond the hills and valleys, beyond the forests and fields, carried on the mist and the hush of the rain. From the tower's high windows, Finn would sometimes see figures on distant paths, their faces turned toward the soft light, their steps slowing, their burdens seeming a little lighter beneath its gentle shine. He came to understand that the flame did not merely illuminate the night sky. It touched hearts in ways unseen, reminding those who wandered of what they'd lost, of what they still longed for, of what was worth finding again. Letters began to appear at the tower's door, left by hands that dared not knock. Pages filled with confessions, hopes, regrets, and dreams too fragile to speak aloud. Finn gathered them with care, adding them to the chest of tokens, feeding the lantern's flame so it might burn all the brighter for those who placed their trust in it. On some nights, the wind carried faint echoes to the tower, the sound of a song hummed by a traveler resting beneath a tree, or the soft weeping of someone who had found comfort at last. The lantern's work was quiet, unseen, but its reach was boundless, and Finn, standing watch in the lonely hours before dawn, no longer felt alone at all. He was part of a web of hearts connected by light, by memory, by the shared longing for peace in a restless world. The flame was no longer just his to tend. It belonged to all who had ever dreamed, all who would ever seek, all who believed that even the smallest light could guide them home. And as the rain fell soft upon the tower, Finn made a silent vow that the lantern would never falter, never fade, as long as there were stories waiting to be remembered and hopes waiting to be kindled anew. One night, as the lantern's warm light bathed the hills and the soft patter of rain filled the air, a storm unlike any Finn had ever known began to gather. The winds howled with a fury that shook the very stones of the tower, and the sky split with lightning that tore the night asunder. Thunder rolled over the land like a great drumbeat of the earth's own heart. Finn stood at the lantern's side, his cloak whipping about him as the tower trembled beneath the storm's mighty hand. The flame flickered and danced wildly, as if straining to hold its place against the wind's relentless roar. Outside, the world seemed lost to shadow. The paths, the trees, the hills all swallowed by darkness deeper than any night Finn had seen. It was as if the storm meant to snuff out every light, every hope, every dream that the lantern had ever guarded. But Finn stood firm. His hands gripped the lantern's base, steadying it as the storm raged on, and he spoke softly to the flame as if to an old friend. "Hold on," he whispered, his voice barely heard above the wind. "You've carried so many. Let me carry you now." And the flame, small but unbroken, answered him with a steady glow, pushing back against the dark. Hours passed, the storm hammering at the tower, but the lantern's light never failed. At last, as dawn broke and the first pale gold of morning touched the edge of the sky, the storm's rage began to ease. The winds softened, the rain gentled, and the world slowly returned from the grip of night. Finn stepped back, breathless, his heart pounding not with fear but with pride, for the lantern's light still burned as true and steady as ever. From that day forward, people spoke of the storm that could not extinguish the keeper's flame. And Finn knew, in the quiet that followed, that the lantern's strength was not only in its fire, but in the hearts that believed in it, that kept it alive even in the darkest hour. The tower remained, the light remained, and so too did hope. For as long as the rain falls and the night comes, the keeper's lantern would shine to guide all who wandered. And so, my dear one, sleep now beneath the soft murmur of rain, and remember, no storm is too great for the light that lives within us.